When looking through the history of Warhammer 40k, specifically through the Age of Strife, we are told about how the Emperor conquered Terra. There are two forces mentioned as being pivotal in his ability to do so. First, there was the Imperial Army, the hundreds of human warrior regiments who fought for the Emperor. Second, there were the Thunder Warriors, which were giant genetically altered warriors who fought besides the Imperial armies under the banner of the Emperor. The Thunder Warriors are described in the lore as brutal, violent creations that eventually met their end on the battlefields of Terra before the Adeptus Astartes, or the Space Marines, were created. After that, the Thunder Warriors were regarded as nothing but a distant memory, a footnote in the vast records of the Imperium's history. Hello everyone, I am Inquisitor Vuln, and I make videos deep diving into the lore of the 40k universe. If that's something that you are into, please like and subscribe for more content as it helps the channel grow. I have been curious about the Thunder Warriors. They seem like such a small part in the greater scheme regarding the Emperor's superhuman warriors, but they had the immense task of Terra's subjugation during a time of complete madness. And while it's true that they no longer exist, I think that the Thunder Warriors deserve their own deep dive video. Who were the Thunder Warriors? What were they, and what happened to them? What is their legacy, if any, in the modern Warhammer 40k universe today? On today's agenda, first we're going to go over the history of the Thunder Warriors. We're going to piece together their scattered lore to get a better idea of their story and contribution to the Unification Wars. Then we're going to look at the legacy of Lightning, the lasting impact that the Thunder Warriors had on the Imperium. Let's get into it. The techno-barbarian tyrant, who would eventually call himself the Emperor of Mankind, rose to power on Earth during the Age of Strife, a period historically characterized by its madness, its societal degradation, and its violence. As a perpetual, he has been alive since before the beginning of written history. He has seen countless civilizations rise and fall. He had discovered his purpose early in life and has pursued that purpose over many lifetimes. He had lived to see the radiant glory that humanity could reach during the Dark Age of technology, and he watched that light extinguish as the old night settled over the species. When the Emperor started the Unification Wars, he was vastly disillusioned. He knew that humanity would need to be forced to submit to his rule if it was to reach the heights of excellence that he knew it could. Power was the only way forward, and his singular rule was the only solution. At this time, the Emperor had under his command various tribes of techno-barbarians who fought under his banner. These tribes would form the first regiments of what would later be called the Imperial Army, but were at the time referred to as the Genos. The Genos were the Emperor's genetically modified armies, and they were divided generally into two groups, the Thunder Regiments and the Strife Epoch Regiments. The Thunder Regiments were the Emperor's first Genos, his first genetically modified armies. The Strife Epoch Regiments would also be composed of genetically modified soldiers, but these regiments were allowed to continue serving the Emperor after the Unification Wars had been won. Having proven themselves to be the best, most adaptable, and competent regiments, the Strife Epoch Regiments would go on to support the Space Marine Legions and were known to the other fighting forces of the growing Imperium as the Old Hundred and treated with the utmost respect. The fact that they were allowed to continue existing and serving is a big deal, because at the end of the Unification Wars, many other thousands of Genos were disbanded, or chemically neutered, or actively purged because the Emperor determined that they did not fit the new paradigm he was attempting to create for the Imperium and humanity. The Thunder Regiments were amongst the Genos that were actively purged at the conclusion of the Unification Wars. The Thunder Regiments were also known as the Thunder Warriors. The specific means of how the Emperor created the Thunder Warriors is unknown. Some sources cite practices like gene collecting, which was common with most Genos to keep the regiments pure genetically due to the radioactive environment of Terra at the time. Some sources state a similar process to that which created the Custodes, namely muscle grafting techniques, somatic gene sculpting, and alchemical augmentation. Other sources cite more elaborate methods used by specific geno, like the Geno 25 Chiliad, where genetic engineering and selection would result in creating tough, imposing, and intimidating warriors and creating martial genetic lines that were used repeatedly. To be fair, all of these methods could have been used to create the Thunder Warriors. What is known is that the Emperor scientist built upon the human design to rapidly increase the Thunder Warriors' muscle mass, to strengthen and grow their skeletal structure to support that muscle mass, and they boosted their cardiovascular system in order to support these extreme physical changes. The Thunder Warriors did not have gene seed organs. Those were created for the Space Marines much later in history. The Thunder Regiment Geno were directly modified human beings. The result of these procedures produced hulking beasts of men that stood between 8 to 9 feet tall, who were possessed of an incredible strength and a warlike spirit unlike anything seen on Terra before. Despite the fact that Terra ran rampant with genetically enhanced warriors, nothing could match these creations. The Thunder Warriors were the embodiment of the Emperor's willingness to use plain, direct, brute force to bring Terra to heel. Besides their physical stature, something else that made the Thunder Warriors stand out from the other fighting forces on Terra was their armor. In truth, Mark I armor was common on Terra at the time because in function it represented the most basic, locally produced type of power armor available. What made the Emperor style of Mark I armor unique were the power packs that were attached to the back of the armor. These powered the suit and significantly increased the upper body strength of the wearer. Another unique feature on the armor were the symbols used on it. The Mark I armor of these warriors was covered in the raptor's head and lightning bolts of the Emperor's own heraldry. These symbols were why the Thunder Warriors became known as the Thunder Warriors by the nation-states of Earth that they conquered. To the Emperor, they were called the Legiones Cataegis, the Storm Legions. The Thunder Warriors were organized into regiments called legions, which contained anywhere from a few to several thousand warriors in each of them. Each legion was said to specialize in a specific kind of warfare that was beneficial toward conquering Terra, and they were led by military commanders known as Primarchs. At this time in history, Primarchs were Thunder Warriors who were genetically identical to their men, but who possessed leadership skills, self-control, and an even temperament, which earned them the recognition and elevation to the role by the Emperor himself. To have leaders of the Thunder Regiments that exhibited self-control and even temperament was important. This is because by their very nature, the Thunder Warriors were brutal savages, monstrous techno-barbarians that enjoyed the violence and destruction of war. Often they lost themselves to the bloodlust of battle and would struggle to regain control of themselves. Though powerful, the Thunder Regiments were imperfect creations. They did not live long lives. If war did not kill them, it would be their own physiology that would kill them. Over time, their bodies would begin to reject the modifications made to them, which would cause widespread internal system failure and agonizing death. They were physically and psychologically unstable, and this was done purposely by the Emperor. The warriors themselves didn't know this, but the Emperor created the Thunder Warriors as temporary tools that he would use to subjugate Terra. The vision of the Emperor went far into the future. He already knew that his true goals were not only to unite humanity on Earth, but to unite humanity across the stars. He had already planned to make a more stable class of superhuman warrior, the Adeptus Astartes, after Terra was under his control, so that he could conquer the stars. But first, he needed Terra under his control, and the Thunder Warriors, with all of their might and barbaric fury, would assure him that. It's for this reason that the Thunder Warriors are regarded in some historical texts as Proto-Astartes, not because they were similar in design to the Astartes, but because they served as an experimental template of the organization and structure for the future Space Marine legions. Though the methods which transformed Thunder Warriors was uniform and made them genetically identical, the means of creating new Thunder Warriors depended on the other genos of the Imperial Army. The most elite from these genos were inducted into the Thunder Regiments, reinforcing the Thunder Warriors. When the Emperor began the Unification Wars, he did so with the protection of his Legio Custodes and the martial might of the Legiones Cataegis. I want you to remember 3 important pieces of information from this part of the video. First, that the Thunder Warriors were not Proto-Astartes in the physical sense. They were regular humans from the early Techno-Barbarian tribes who supported the Emperor that were genetically engineered and modified to be massive and barbaric warriors of the Thunder Legions. Second, the Thunder Legions were actually regiments, the first regiments of what would later be called the Imperial Army. They were regiments because the Thunder Warriors were human and not Astartes. The regiments were just called legions. Third, that the Legiones Cataegis were always intended to be an unstable and temporary fighting force. The Emperor would go on to conquer many other populations using the Thunder Warriors and raise many more regiments of the Geno soldiers for the Imperial Army. According to the lore, by the end of the Unification Wars, some of the regiments of the Imperial Army had to be disbanded or purged because they did not fit the ideal that the Emperor had for the future of the Imperium he was trying to build, and the Legiones Cataegis, the Thunder Warriors, were amongst the regiments that were purged. There is no cohesive, linear, battle-by-battle record of the conflicts that the Thunder Warriors fought during the Unification Wars. To paint any kind of picture of what was happening during the Unification Wars is to piece together various bits of lore using key moments in the narrative. That being said, from what can be determined by available information on the battles that the Thunder Warriors fought, they were reserved and deployed for the most intense fighting and cataclysmic battles of the early Unification Wars. This was done on purpose for 2 reasons. The most difficult conflicts naturally demanded the toughest warriors that the Emperor had, which were the Thunder Warriors. But this was also done because the casualties to the Thunder Warriors was expected to be high, and they usually were, but that's the point. Now, before we look at some of the conflicts, I just want to make another point. When looking at the battles that happened during the Unification Wars, there can be some confusion because sometimes it will say that both the Thunder Warriors and the Space Marines were present at a location or conflict. This confusion can be solved by understanding that the Thunder Warriors were used as a force to force the nation states into submission during the early Unification, and the Space Marine legions were used to reinforce that submission during the latter Unification. There are quite a few examples of this. For example, the Achaemenid Empire was one of the earliest Techno-Barbarian nation-states to submit to the rule of the Emperor, and according to the lore, this submission would spare them from invasion by the Thunder Warriors, who at the time were the Emperor's primary fighting force. During the latter Unification, when Space Marines were developed, the Emperor would take the initial recruits for the Thousand Sons Legion from the Achaemenid Empire. During the early Unification Wars, the Albion clans fought against the Emperor and his Thunder Warriors, actually forcing the Emperor to try a more peaceful solution. The Albion clans would eventually join the Emperor after this, and during the latter Unification Wars, when the Space Marines were developed, the Emperor would return to Albia to take the initial recruits for 3 different legions of Space Marines. One of the biggest recorded battles involving the Thunder Warriors was the war against the Molansen Confederacy in Nordic. The Emperor's forces that were there included 22 cold weather specialist regiments of the Imperial Army, 30 Custodes, and at least 1 full legion of Thunder Warriors, one of which being the 4th Regiment, the Iron Lords, led by their Primarch commander Ushoten. The Molansen Confederacy was destroyed by the combined force, but over 7,000 Thunder Warriors were killed in the conflict. It was here that Constantin Valdor, Captain General of the Custodes, witnessed firsthand the psychological instability of the Thunder Warriors, who had mostly lost themselves to the rage and bloodlust of battle. It was here that Valdor grew concerned for their future. The Thunder Warriors were also present in the battle against the Pan-Pacific Empire, which was one of the most powerful nation-states on Terra during the early Unification Wars. The last battle that the Thunder Warriors were recorded to fight was the final battle of the Unification Wars, known as the Battle of Mount Ararat. This would be the battle during which the Thunder Warriors were actively purged. As the Unification War was coming to its conclusion and civilization was re-establishing itself across Terra, the Thunder Warriors were deployed less and less. This was a bad thing. The Thunder Warriors were made for violence and war and were not much good for anything else. So in times of relative calmness, they were actually a threat to the world the Emperor was trying to build. It was during this time that the Thunder Warriors began to collectively become aware of their physiological instability, as many of their number would die not out of war, but due to physical ailments and their gene-enhanced bodies breaking down. Suspicions began to rise, and the Thunder Warrior regiments began to question whether or not the Emperor purposely designed them to be short-lived and unstable. With these questions came the feeling of betrayal. The Thunder regiments had willingly conquered Terra for the Emperor, only for them to be made ticking time bombs of self-destruction. The realization dawned on them that they were never intended to survive the battles that they would fight, and the Thunder Warriors loved life. They loved the violence of war, and they were proud to fight for the Emperor. But when the Emperor would stop replacing their casualties with new Thunder Warriors, these suspicions became open accusations. The Thunder Regiments became an actual threat, not only to society on Terra, but to the Emperor himself. As such, they could not be permitted to continue existing. The remaining Thunder Regiments were deployed to Mount Ararat of the Ural Mountains of where Turkey once was during the Age of Terra, accompanied by thousands of Adeptus Custodes. What followed was a slaughter. The Adeptus Custodes were tasked with the eradication of the Thunder Regiments, and on the Ural Mountains, the Thunder Warriors were massacred by the only force on Terra that could destroy them in combat, the Custodes. A battle of such magnitude at the time of increasing peace and stability would not go unnoticed, and so propaganda was spread about the Battle of Mount Ararat. But the story that was being shared was not the reality. The reality was that the Custodes slaughtered the Thunder Warriors under the command of the Emperor. The story that was being shared was that the Thunder Warriors fought the last war of unification against a powerful enemy hidden in the Ural Mountains, and though they fought with bravery and valor and their efforts led to victory, the Thunder Warriors were killed to the last man. Perhaps this story was a way to honor the Thunder Warriors by attributing them with the end of the Unification Wars. Perhaps it was just another illustration of the Emperor's tyrannical thinking to do such a thing and manipulate the story. Either way, with the Thunder Warriors eradicated, the Emperor focused on developing his Adeptus Astartes, his Space Marines, which would be more suited for the world that he was trying to build. This would not be the final appearance of the Thunder Warriors. Some of them actually survived and escaped the battle at Mount Ararat, going into hiding from the Emperor's forces. Most of the survivors would die of gene-enhanced causes, but some became gang leaders or gladiators in Terra's underground. However, they would generally be hunted down by a combination of the Custodes and the newly formed 1st Legion of Space Marines, the Angels of Death. But there was a retaliation strike against the Emperor for what he ordered to happen in the Ural Mountains, and it was spearheaded by Ushoten, a Primarch of the Thunder Legions. Ushoten was the Primarch of the 4th Thunder Legion, the Iron Lords. Ushoten had fought and survived many battles of unification and was favored by Constantin Valdor, who he had fought besides during the Battle of Malin Sen. Ushoten had survived the culling of the Thunder Warriors and led a small group of them, combined with a rebellion militia, to attempt at assaulting the Imperial Palace, the residence of the Emperor on the Himalayan mountains. This plan had been foiled. The rebellion force was confronted by the Custodes and the full number of the 1st Legion of Space Marines. The rebellion did not stand a chance, and according to available information, Ushoten was killed by Constantin Valdor. As a collective, the Thunder Warriors did not survive into the Age of the Imperium, and for a time they were remembered, if only symbolically, through the armor that gained them their notoriety. The Mark I or Thunder armor continued to be used by the new Space Marine legions until the Emperor allied with Mars, developing the Mark II Crusade suit of armor. Some Space Marine legions, like the World Eaters, the Space Wolves, and even the White Scars, were noted for having an enthusiastically warlike temperament similar to the Thunder Warriors. There is even one case of a possible Thunder Warrior, Indrid Har, the Riven Hound, being inducted into the Terran World Eaters Legion after the Unification Wars. There was one remaining symbol of the Legacy of Lightning, and it was the early Raptor Imperialis symbol. This version of the Emperor's heraldry was worn exclusively by the Thunder Warriors during the early Unification Wars, but during the Great Crusade it became a symbol of status and seniority. It was said that those who wore this symbol fought under the Emperor directly, or fought during the latter Unification Wars on Terra. Though they are mainly forgotten in the current setting of Warhammer 40k, the histories of the Imperium still credit the Thunder Warriors with the victory of the Unification Wars and fighting the savage battles of Old Night, paving a way for the future of humanity. I had a great time making this video. The Thunder Warriors are one of the most interesting fighting forces of the Imperium's history because they're not Space Marines, but they're like Space Marines. They were stronger than Space Marines, but they were more unstable than Space Marines, you know? The comparisons are really interesting. There are fans of the 40k universe who are fascinated with the Unification Wars and the Thunder Warriors to this day, and I'm actually one of those people. In fact, I may or may not be building some Thunder Warriors soon. I don't know. We'll just have to see. There's not a lot of stories about the Thunder Warriors, though they are mentioned and featured in a few of the Horus Heresy books. If you are interested in the Unification Wars and understanding some of the politics at the time and gaining a better understanding of the Thunder Warriors, I highly recommend Valdor, Birth of the Imperium by Chris Raitt. Anyone who has read this book understands it's one of the best books to understand not only the mind of the Emperor, but the Custodes and the Thunder Warriors as well. I hope that you all enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I hope you guys learned something new and interesting. If you did and you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe for more content, and please share this with your hobby friends as it helps the channel grow and I would appreciate it. Without anything else to say, Inquisitor Vuln out. Remember, the Emperor protects and the future is successor.